Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the murder of a 19-year-old American punk musician called Brian Deneke. This case was suggested by Ariana, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and if you have any more, please do let me know. Brian Theodore Deneke was born on the 9th of March in 1978 to parents Michael Max, who was known more commonly as Mike, and Elizabeth Louise, who was more commonly known as Betty. He was born in Wichita, Kansas. His parents married in 1974 and they went on to have 2 children. Obviously, Brian was one of them, and the other was his brother, who they called Jason Michael. In 1981, the family decided to move to southwest Amarillo. Brian actually went to 3 different elementary schools: Belmar, Paramount Terrace, and Crockett Middle School. He was a dancer in a Boy Scouts troop during his time in school, but he did actually end up leaving because later on in life he got really interested in skateboarding, and apparently one of his instructors or something ended up throwing his skateboard like out of the door or something like that, and that got him really angry, and so he decided to not go back. As he got older, as I said, his interest changed. He started enjoying music, and to some people in that time, it was thought of as an unusual taste in music and an unusual taste in fashion. And obviously he had a real passion for skateboarding. His brother loved the same kind of things too. He went down the same kind of path, and he really enjoyed skateboarding as well, and his dad even made them ramps in the back garden so that they could do it in the comfort of their own home. He went on to attend Amarillo High School and ended up dropping out in his first year. At the age of 17 though, he went on to get his GED. Brian was really friendly and charismatic, and he really enjoyed art and music. Some of his friends used to nickname him as Sunshine. He was an artist for Stanley Marsh III's art project Dynamite Museum. He would hand make mock road signs which were put out across the streets of Amarillo. The type of unusual music at that time that he loved was punk rock. He eventually would stop skateboarding and he would focus more on his music. It wasn't long before he had a mohawk, he was wearing spikes, chains, dog collars, and he ended up becoming a punk. It was something that his parents didn't agree with because they felt like he would get a lot of flack and abuse for it because people would not accept it, and that he would get a lot of prejudice, and they warned him of that. But that's what he wanted to do, and that is what he did. He was seen as a bit of a leader in the punk groups, and he was really into music, and he would actually write out to certain bands and stuff that they loved to try and get them to play in his area. Like, he would take that money out of his own pocket and he would keep writing to them until they would come. Eventually he decided that he wanted to be in a band himself, so he gets together a band where he is the lead vocalist, and they are called the White Slave Traders. He had such huge ambitions of being a famous punk rock musician. Him and the other punks, along with like emos and skinheads at the time, were not accepted at all, and they got a lot of harassment. They were called freaks. People would bully them often. People would literally drive by as they're walking down the street and throw stuff at them out of the car. They would hit them. It was just bullying at its worst, and you know, it was awful what they had to go through just because they liked different music and liked to look differently. Despite all of the abuse that he got, Brian stayed positive. He stayed outgoing, and he often said that people should not be treated that way because of how they dress, and he was right. He is right, but at the time that was how they were seen, unfortunately, and it was rife in the 90s in Amarillo. Now, there was this place where all kinds of people hung out. So you'd have the punks, you'd have everyone, you'd have the jocks, and it was just a popular youth hangout spot. It was the International House of Pancakes. Now, the jocks and the punks and things like that did not like each other. The jocks would often call the punks freaks and things like that, and it just caused a lot of tension between them. It's a place that you might go and expect a lot of fights to happen because they just didn't get on with each other at all. On the 6th of December in 1997, a confrontation broke out between a guy called Dustin Camp. He was a football player, a jock essentially, and a guy called John King, who was a member of the punk community. A witness called Kendra Pettit said that At one point after, I don't know, something had been going on, Dustin gets into his Cadillac and he actually tries to run over a group of the punks. She actually said that she didn't know how they managed to all get out of the way because Dustin floored it and he was going so fast and they literally had to jump out of the way. But luckily none of them were injured. His tyres were also screeching, that's how fast he was going. John held out his hand and he had a police baton. And so he held out this police baton and it actually smashed one of Dustin's windows. Dustin claimed that that never happened though, and so did his friends, but the tensions were rising and the anger had obviously built up over the next week. Rumours began buzzing around town that this big epic fight was going to happen between like the punks and the jocks, and they were going to all have it out on the Friday night. So we're now on the Friday the 12th of December 1997. After a heavy night of drinking, it was about 11 p.m. Dustin goes to pick up two of his friends, Elise Thompson and Rob. They jump into his Cadillac and he drives them to the House of Pancakes. The House of Pancakes was just opposite the Western Shopping Plaza. And obviously they were expecting this big fight to happen outside in the car park. And it did happen. They had bats, they had weapons, they had chains, they had all sorts. But the punks seemed to have more weapons than the jocks, but the jocks by far outnumbered them. People began beating each other up. They were kicking each other. You know, some punks had jocks on the floor, kicking the bejeebers out of them, and vice versa. Everyone was being kicked, punched, swinging weapons. And eventually the punks decided that, you know, they were too outnumbered and they decided that they were going to run. And then the jocks chased after them. Elise and Rob were all watching this and they decided that they actually wanted to get out and wanted like no part of it. And so Dustin was waiting in his Cadillac and they jumped in. He sped off really fast and they were just glad to be getting out of there. Except Dustin had different plans. He was going to chase the punks in his car, like he had previously. As he pulls out the parking lot, he sees the teenagers all fighting and they were slowly sort of spilling out, making their way to the Western Plaza Shopping Centre. And so he drives into them. He knocks one of the punks. It was said that it was just a nudge, but it was enough to fling him on the bonnet. And then they began attacking the car with bats and chains and things like that. And then Dustin speeds off again. Brian Deneke was seen next running away down the street. And Dustin decided to follow him. He goes after Brian, shouting, "I'm a ninja in my caddy." Now Brian's running and he's got nowhere to go. He's running as fast as he can, but it wasn't fast enough. And he turns around just in time to see the car heading towards him. Dustin knocks into Brian. Brian's eyes are terrified. You know, he is absolutely petrified as Dustin knocks into him. And Elise said that she remembered the sickening thud as he hit the car. It threw him up onto the bonnet for a few seconds and then he just disappeared under the car. When Elise looked back, she could see his body and there was a lot of blood. She also saw a girl screaming and running towards Brian. Dustin said, "I bet he likes that," and then he carried on driving and he drove off. Brian's friends recalled that day and they said that everyone started cheering after Brian was hit with that car. And his friends all gathered around him. Apparently Jason was cradling Brian in his arms or his lap, and it was said that there was just blood everywhere. Brian had unfortunately been killed. His injuries were just too extensive. An autopsy would later reveal that his skull, spine, ribs and pelvis had all been crushed. Dustin got to Rob's house and he began crying, saying that he had made a mistake. Elise and Rob said their goodbyes, they got out, they each went to their own homes where they woke up their parents and told them what had just happened. The parents rang each other and agreed that they would take their children down to the police station immediately. And that's what they did. They went down there and they gave the statements. Dustin got home and he woke his parents up and told them what had happened, and they said that they would just sort it out in the morning. The next morning, the police went to Dustin's house with a warrant and they seized his Cadillac. And they took a lot of samples from it. There was a lot of blood samples and they took some hairs from it and things like that. Dustin was arrested and charged with murder. During his trial, his defense tried to claim that Dustin was actually acting in self-defense of a friend who Brian was attacking, and basically trying to shift the blame onto Brian and basically the entire punk community. Through the trial, the punks were portrayed as violent thugs, and it even went as far as calling them armed goons. His defense attorney used some incidents from Brian's past to make him out like this really violent guy and claimed that he was the aggressor on the night of the incident. At one point, he even held up his leather jacket, which Brian had pinned something to it which said "destroy everything," and said, "This is what that weapon-wielding goon war on the night of the altercation. Looks to me like he was on a mission to kill. In fact, it was actually just something from his favourite band, Filth, and that is why he pinned it to him. It meant more along the lines of, like, punks were really seen as these horrible hate people, and punks destroy everything didn't mean violence and things like that. It meant try and break down the barriers and stuff like that and destroying all of them. They also portrayed Dustin as this wholesome and clean-cut youth, that he was a good Christian, a good Texan, and a good football player. All of the punks that got up on the stand said that Brian was the victim. Elise, who of course was in Dustin's car, incriminated him too. She said that she didn't see him acting in self-defense of a friend, and then she testified on the "I'm a ninja in the caddy," and I bet I liked that kind of statements that he made. Now, although Dustin was facing a murder charge, the jury did not find him guilty of murder. They only found him guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced as a result of that to 10 years probation and a $10,000 fine. He basically walked away a free man. A lot of people in the court thought that that sentence was not enough, and a lot of people were surprised that he wasn't charged with murder. One person in the court said what stuck with him the most, like above everything, "I felt like Brian was running away and Dustin had a chance to stop, and he just didn't," essentially. He believes that he was given a second chance because of how young he was, but at the end of the day, what he did was wrong. He murdered Brian that day. The jurors refused to comment after the trial as well. In the large scale of things, the Amarillo community just kind of shrugged off his sentencing and they just carried on with their lives. In 2001, Dustin was apprehended for underage drinking and for being a minor in possession of alcohol. His father tried to cover up his probation violations, and I believe that he got some time for that, or sentence. He got some punishment for that. I don't know, can't remember what it was. In September of 2001, Dustin Camp received an 8-year prison sentence for violating his probation. He served 5 years of that in 2006. He was paroled under supervision until that was up in 2009. And that's that. Because of how the punks were thought of in the 90s in Texas, they were all violent, they were all horrible, aggressive people. Dustin got off a murder charge with basically a slap on the wrist. Okay, so maybe he didn't actually intend to kill him, but I'm not being funny. You're heading towards someone with a car. He had intentions to run him over, that is certain, because he could have stopped at any point, and he did not. He carried on, and he's going, "I'm a ninja in my caddy." And then when he actually ran him over, I bet he liked that. Like, he had every intention to run him over, and I'm sorry, but a lot of car accidents prove to be fatal. So even if the murder wasn't premeditated or he didn't actually intend to murder him, he still did. He drove that car over him with the intention of driving a car over him, and he killed him. Like, he ended Brian's life that night. And that is really, really frustrating, because I don't think that he should have got away without serving any time for his murder. Like, Brian lost his life, and what justice did he get? In my eyes, my opinion, he didn't get any justice. Honestly, I do think the sentencing was far too lenient, like, seriously. And it is so angering how they were perceived and treated. Poor Brian Deneke lost his life that day. He was so young, and just because he was different, and nobody got done for it, essentially. And it's just super frustrating, to say the least. Let me know what you guys think on this one. Do you think that Dustin got the right sentencing, or do you think that he should have been sent down for murder? Just like to know your opinions on it. Obviously, you know mine. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you enjoyed the video, give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content. To all my regulars, I adore you guys. Thank you. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Brian Deneke. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.